Good evening and get ready. We thank you for tuning in to Community Updates and Enlightened Hearts. I'm your host, Michelle White. My co host, Dr. Regina, it will be here momentarily. And this evening, we've got two awesome guests. We have none other than Ken Snap, who is running for the Detroit Public School Board. And then we also have DeAndre Jackson, who's a dynamic community service person that provides venues for people to expand their businesses. And you want to tune in, you want to stay tuned in right here on Community Updates and Enlightened Hearts. You know, we always like to share a lot of things with you, but for time's sake, I want you to go to Michelle Turner White Facebook page, and then you can look. I posted all types of jobs and definitely election material. If you have not gone out to vote, go out and vote. Do not think that your vote does not count. Your vote counts. You are part of the problem if you don't go out and vote. We need to keep democracy, but whoever you vote for, just go out and vote, please. So, we've got Ken Snap, and Mr. Ken Snap is a native Detroiter, graduated from Cass Technical High School, grew up on the east side of Detroit, and he is a Navy veteran, a
No, my
retired.
father is.
Oh, your
My
father is
father
a,
is.
okay,
Yeah.
okay, and so Ken has been doing a lot. You played football with Cass Tech.
hmm
All right. And while pursuing his collegiate athletic career, he became involved with politics after studying political science. So, Ken, what made you decide to want to run for the board, the school board?
Well, thank you for the question and thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you for
I'm
being here.
I am very elated to be here as well as our guest as well. It's an interesting question when people ask me what makes you want to run, and then often people congratulate you just for running, and I find that to be an issue within itself because people do not feel empowered enough to get involved into the political system. We have some very, very intelligent people inside the city of Detroit, and I think that we have to encourage these people to come up with new, uh, innovative ideas, create new blueprints that don't exist, give access to social goods and social justice at every level. Now, my issue right now is that we continue to focus on certain areas inside the city of Detroit, and I think that education has to be elevated to, as our friend earlier said, beyond the bare minimum and include everybody instead of just Cass, King, and Renaissance. We have kids in the Persian Osborne area. We have kids in the Cody area. Those kids are left out of the conversation, and we often say that no child left behind, but we find that to be a fallacy in itself because our children are left behind. As we're reading at a very low rate inside the city of Detroit, and as our guest here also said, it is a national issue. I just got back from D.C. not too long ago for a fundraiser, and I joined forces with other people who are running for school board on the local side in D.C. And we found it to be a national issue because our babies, our black and brown babies inside urban areas, are often in this dismantled urban school system, and it seems to be very, very, very intentional when it comes to politics. When it comes to understanding what's at the forefront of this election, they're getting ready to try to ban more books and ban more type of curriculums and critical race theory. Now we have to have people and advocates at the forefront in all these major cities. Over 30 major cities right now face the same issue that Detroit does. But we only hear about Detroit right now because that's where we are. But we have to make sure we focus.
Well, right now,
And
you're all over the country.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
We've got over 80,000 viewers and listeners around the country.
Well,
So you're going to tell them about Detroit, and Detroit has been certain people have been trying to give Detroit a little bit of bad press, but we have a lot of great things right here in the city of Detroit,
that is correct. Yeah.
and one of them is our school system, which we are
Yeah.
continuing to improve upon.
Yes, yes, ma'am.
So you were saying why you wanted to
Well,
run for
yes,
school board in your
I just
policy.
believe that I think we have to have people that are relatable and people who can. Someone Politics is most effective when it's local. National elections are what we focus on mainly, but local politics essentially change everything. It's from how your trash is picked up, where your kids go to school at, if the snow gets shoveled, the things where you lay your head down at night. Local politics really are affected by that. Now you have to have someone who's relatable and who's reachable. Oftentimes, people might have an issue, and if you can't sit there and call your school board member, then what good is it electing someone who's just going to be there and be a rubber stamp? I want to be someone who's a champion for all people, from the east, from the west, southwest. We have a lot of ESL learners, or people who their first language is not English. Those people are left out of the conversation oftentimes, and they are Detroiters now. They come here, they're immigrants or whatever it may be. They are now
So how
Detroiters.
are we dealing with the language barrier? Because when they come here and the children need to get into school, they can't all take ELS classes immediately
Well, that's well. One thing is, um,
or ESL.
yes, we're failing when it comes to that. Oftentimes, if you call on a automated system, and you can hear the options for English and in Spanish, but the option is only in English. So you have someone who's speaking Spanish and they don't know to press two because it's saying for Spanish, press two in English. There's no Espanol. There's no any of that.
So,
It's
so
we're
that'll be one of the things
yeah,
that you will help work on.
yes, definitely inviting everyone to be part of the community is something I'm definitely working on.
And DeAndre, feel free if you've got some questions. We want people to call in, and you should be able to see the new phone number scrolling along the bottom of the screen. And I'm going to read it out momentarily. But we thank you again for tuning in to Community Updates and Enlightened Hearts. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and share. You want to share, you want to subscribe so it'll ping you every time the show comes on and you'll know where we are. But you can also feel free to give us a call at 313-744-9305. 313. Okay. So we won't have the phone available for you right now. But you can feel free to text in. You can, while you're watching us on either WJZZ's Cool TV's Facebook page, or watching on Michelle Turner White's Facebook page, or catching us on YouTube. We're on all streaming platforms. So you can text in. I'm going to be looking at my phone. Put your comments in via social media and ask the questions that you want to know from those candidates. These candidates, this particular candidate today, Mr. Ken Snap. So, Mr. Snap, you mentioned about how there's so many books, and that there are even going to be more books that are removed from the school
Yeah,
buildings.
well, that's what's at stake nationally right now. If you pay attention to Project 2025 and what's being spewed and the rhetoric that's been spewed by the opposing party, um, they're essentially just trying to get rid of books that expand the critical thought process. Oftentimes, if you look at our curriculums inside the schools, we focus on STEM and we focus on finding ways to find answers to the same question but in different ways. So essentially, if you're taking away critical theory and the way you think, we're essentially creating a cookie cutter type of style of education, and that's not what we are. That's not what it is. I mean, there's multiple ways to get to an answer. There's many ways to get
So
to where
once
you
you
want to
get
be.
elected to the board, we're going to speak positively.
Yes, well,
Then what do you think? Because a lot of that removal of books is because of, and correct me if I'm wrong, the whole LBGTQ agenda of wanting to promote more of those books, incorporate that train of thought, and be inclusive to everyone. Am I correct?
well, no, you also have critical race theory, as I talked about earlier. So if you look in Florida, I mean, you probably could speak to it as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but when you look in Florida and understand what the governor down there, DeSantis, has done, he's essentially outlawed it. Many the entire school system to talk about critical race theory because certain folks who have a certain melanin, a grade of melanin,
Nicely
total
put.
melanin, feel uncomfortable about these conversations because it makes them feel as if they are responsible for slavery or for anti-Semitic things or for anti-race things
So they want
because
to remove
they
that
don't want to
too.
feel bad. And now we're talking about feelings and
Well, a lot
emotions
of it
and
isn't true
logic.
anyway.
You
So,
know,
if I
true.
may,
Yeah.
uh,
He had a question.
as far as critical race theory goes, I would just ask for, as I've dealt with a lot of people in the community, when you say critical race theory, it's a hot button word, and a lot of people don't actually know what that means, so they don't understand what's actually happening in schools. Before I let you explain that to them, I would just like to add in, it's hard to get somebody to read when all of the literature does not look like them. So when you add in the literature to make it look more like the people that are receiving it, they're more inept to go in and learn and want to read and want to understand the material. So I think our deficit in our ability to read is declining directly in the country due to our melting pot becoming more diverse and our literature not.
Awesome. That's well put.
Very well put, sir.
Thank you.
Dr. Regina.
Yeah, so let me just, hello, how are you
Hi,
guys
Dr.
doing?
Regina.
If I may just make a correction, because there is no such thing. So I want the audience to really understand a critical race theory, because critical race theory was really for a college, for students that are going to law school. So what they did in the South, they took that word and they began to make it a hot button word. And so they were saying that there was sensitivity for let's just say it, for whites. And so this wasn't what they wanted. They didn't want their kids to be feeling bad. But the truth of the matter is, particularly being the age that we are, and I don't have to tell my age, but their books had, oh, you know, yeah. Okay. That's okay. That's all right. You're all right. You're all right, because I'll take my age. So so in that they really have never really wanted us to have an understanding about who we are, and there was a time where blacks actually took the lead on making sure that we were educated about who we were, and then we start integrating. And some people really believe that us integrating has caused that problem, because the history books do not reflect. As a matter of fact, they want to tell it in a pretty way.
Yes.
And so critical race theory was really a college class, actually.
Doctor, that's not really, I mean, you're 100% correct.
Well,
But
right.
that's not a new thing. I don't want to mistake the lady's name, but I believe it was Sojourner Truth who made the Ain't I a Woman speech, and they completely translated her speech into what would make white culture comfortable with hearing a black woman
That's
speak
what I'm
at
saying.
that time. I'm agreeing with you wholeheartedly. It's been that way. They have never been comfortable with hearing strong, educated opinions speak out, and they always make it a hot button topic until they can make it into something that they feel comfortable palatable.
Right,
Which
yeah.
is doing a disservice to doctors like yourself who speak extremely well and is extremely knowledgeable in the subjects that you speak about. But then they portray you on television, or us on television, as if we don't speak that way. That was one of the main things I focused on in my poetry club and comedy, because when you get people writing and they can write about what they're actually experiencing, you find out that the black community is extremely articulate.
Right. So Crenshaw is the one that came up with critical race theory for law school students. So I would just encourage everyone to go and find out more about critical race theory, and also to
We have
begin
a
to
caller to finish
educate.
that point.
I didn't think we could-
Not caller, but we have.
Okay,
somebody to
that
take
we can make sure that our children and the adults really understand how important it is for us to learn our own history.
Absolutely.
Well, can I add something really quickly before
Yeah.
we go there? So, as an educator, last year I was teaching history to 7th and 8th grade students. Oftentimes, when you open the history book, and then we get to, and this was actually the American history that we were going about. So, this was the founding of the Constitution, the founding of America, all the way into right before the Civil War, which is what the contents of the book were. Okay. Before that, I scrapped everything they knew about it, everything, and I went to the map. I talked about how disproportionate Africa was.
Absolutely.
I talked about how, if you look, and I asked this very, very important question because I am a Christian believer. I might have, and I was at a charter school when I started teaching, so it wasn't bringing religion in there. But I asked, what color is Jesus? Most of them said he's white, and I said, okay, what color are the Egyptians? Oh, black. So went to the map that was at the back We talked about the disproportionate size. We talked about Pangea, but then I also pointed and I elevated this question and I asked them to have high order of thinking. If Egypt is right here and they said they're black, and they talked about how hot it is and how, the sun changes your skin tone. And I said, so we believe Jesus to be white, correct? And I said, this is Jerusalem. They are neighbors in themselves. How does color and the melanin and the depiction of one person change immediately? That's like going to Cedar Point.
Well,
I was like, let's go to Cedar Point. How could it possibly be different? Our children and the curriculums that are being taught in our schools, to your point, do not depict us to be of origin to
correct.
the greatest places in the world. We
Correct.
don't talk about those places. We talk about how the white man has cultivated this culture. We don't talk about how Benjamin Banneker essentially built D.C. and our nation's capital.
Correct.
We don't talk about how the black people were influential coming from the South and migrating up to the North to essentially put the country on wheels. We don't talk about how black people were pivotal in World War II. We don't talk about our Tuskegee Airmen enough. We only
Right.
talk
Well,
about
the history
certain.
is just not
Yes,
shared
it's not.
across the board.
It's not because.
But
yeah.
before you go there, we had
Yeah.
a caller, a texter
Mhm.
right in. They said it's not true about something that one of you said about critical race theory. The issue with the critical race theory was intertwined with racial issues with the LGBTQ agenda. And DeSantis said, take out the LGBTQ agenda, and then it would be okay to talk about it.
I think we have a whole bunch of
Yeah.
That's
opinions,
true.
so,
yeah, you're right. Because
Yeah.
if that person were going to do some research and
Yeah.
talking about DeSantis in Florida, they actually have a cartoon character where Frederick Douglass is saying, like talking to a white girl, and it says, well, doing away with slavery, something like that. And then she says, well, if it wasn't slavery, what would have happened? He says, it's something to the effect like slavery was better than death. So, so that's what they're doing. They actually is giving us true watered down to something that Frederick Douglass wouldn't even say. But I think it's a great issue to keep talking about because you're right. There's a lot of lies actually out there about it.
But I don't want us to get stuck on critical race theory because I
Okay.
want us to be able to ask our candidate here some questions so that people will know
Awesome.
where he stands, his priorities, what his plan is as he gets on the school board. And I'm sure that's
Right,
part of it.
Yeah.
But we
But this
want
is a
to,
beautiful. That's
It
beautiful
is. That's a-
conversation, and
it
that
is
it
great
strengthens.
conversation.
I would
And
like
it's-
to-
strengthens our relationship.
and it's important.
I haven't been to my Bible study in quite some time, but we did do this conversation at my facility. And I believe his name was King Herod, who was chasing the baby Jesus when he was born because he had heard a prophecy. And
That's
he
correct.
fled into Egypt.
Mm-hmm.
And when he fled into Egypt, he couldn't find him, so he stopped looking for him. How are you able to flee into a country that is known under its original name, Kemet, or Land of the Black, and not be black? You would have stood out immediately. So I tell people, if you can think critically, if you can think outside of the boxes that you're taught to think inside, the answers are usually directly in front of you. And as for your caller who wrote in, they tie this issue to everything. That's why we referred to it earlier as a hot button issue, because what they're trying to distract you from is the simple fact that they do not want to teach the history because it makes them uncomfortable, the amount of bloodshed irresponsibly to gain and create the wealth that this country has to be a first world country. Now, I am personally a diehard patriot. I serve the country. I love this country. I'd serve it again. However,
For your service to our country.
thank you for your support. However, we do need to talk about the people that made it. This country was built on the back of slave labor. That created the wealth. Now, if you can't teach that in a school, then you should apologize for doing it in the public.
That's just it. Just a beautiful thing. That's right.
Well, I think both issues are equally important. The LGBTQ agenda and how it's being handled and forced upon those who, do you, but don't make me do you. Do you. I got you. But I don't want to do you. Okay? I don't want to see it on every commercial. I don't want it in the schools all over the place, but that's just me. So, We have a couple of other questions too. They want to know, but before I ask this question, what will be your priorities?
Well, as I've given you guys literature, I don't know. If I can
Yes,
use
give
some.
it to
Yeah,
them.
here you go.
Uplifting
Yes,
teachers, empowering students,
yes,
parent engagement,
yes.
and building safety.
Well, and I'll
All
quickly,
important.
yeah, I'll quickly hit on it. It's so many more important things, but as you know, I can't fit everything
Right,
onto
right.
literature here. But one, uplifting teachers has to be the priority because right now our teachers in Detroit face burnout unlike any other. The code of conduct must change. Our teachers are left powerless when it comes to behavior problems. Oftentimes, teachers leave the building crying. They leave their jobs in tears and in shambles because they don't know how to appropriately teach 35 plus children. We also have to make sure that we have one-on-one engagement, and how that looks is giving our paraeducators and giving our building support staff a pay raise so that they can give that one-on-one feel. So if you have a class
And they
of
need more than one teacher to
yes,
35 students.
so that's what that building the support staff. If you can pay them more and put them with teachers, now that class of 30 can be cut down to a class of 15 with
Exactly.
one-on-one support. You understand what I'm saying? So we have to pay people more because our kids deserve more. And I think that we have been accepting the bare minimum when it comes to everything in Detroit because things have gotten better at a very minuscule rate. I think that we've accepted that, oh, it's getting better, but it's not. And this is something well, I'll get back to the other things, but my parents chose to send me to private school before I went to Cass Tech. My mom was a Detroit public school teacher for over 30 years. My dad was a General Motors employee, both union strong. They made the decisive decision to send me to private school, and I went to, technically, it was the best private school in the state at the time. It was a national blue ribbon accredited school,
That's
and
good.
St. Paul Catholic School in Grosse Pointe Farms, nationally accredited, not state, nationally.
National.
And the fifth grade, I was reading at the 12th grade level, and my counterparts were reading either equally or above.
You saying we need to get some of that into the Detroit
No,
public school?
it wasn't. It's not just that. It's the rate of exposure. It's the intentionality of feeding into the children. There was nothing different about those kids and our kids right now inside the
Same
school.
here. I was
Yeah.
the first black student to go to a private school,
Right.
Our Lady of La Salette in Berkeley,
Okay.
in the 70s,
Yeah.
early 70s.
Mm-hmm.
First black people.
Black
Yeah.
history.
Black
Appreciate
history.
it.
That is Black
Appreciate
History.
it.
And
Yes.
my parents thought that it was going to be different. It was a Catholic school,
Yeah.
and there was no brown. There were no brown,
Yeah.
and no other color
Yeah.
people. But those students were no different.
No different.
Matter of fact, they did more things.
Yes.
And
yes.
they were
yes.
engaged in things that I
Yes.
didn't even think about yet.
But,
I went to
yeah.
Al-Anon meetings with some of my
Yeah.
students.
But to the point of that, my statement of saying that I went there, I don't want that to be the case for my future children. I don't ever want anyone to have to choose a Detroit teacher to have to choose. Well, I don't want my child to go to the school that I teach. What does that say about the quality of our education? It says that it is abysmal that someone has to work extremely hard just to send their kids to a better school, a better opportunity. It sounds like we're back in segregation days to where people have to make the decision to send them to Berkeley, to the Grosse Points, or out of district. They have to literally navigate this red lining issue of where you cannot send kids to out of district schools because you have to live in the district. And
Not to interrupt you, kind of just now. I just have a question for you.
Mhm.
Outside of the private schools, how do you intend to address the literary frustration that comes from the fact that 12th grade students weren't built up and are in fact reading at a 5th grade level nationally?
Okay.
So then when you introduce your education, it is well needed.
So I'm glad you asked that. That's something that no one else is talking about in this entire campaign. I've literally been speaking from this from day one. The core tenets of a child's education start where? They start at home.
Absolutely.
Now, this is the issue that we face. If 50% of our city is considered to be illiterate, 48% roughly, we'll say that's 50% because census are always give or plus. That means that half of our city can't read or they cannot essentially read at a proficient level of an eighth grader.
And sometimes
Correct.
because their parents
Exactly.
can't read.
No, I'm saying, so the parents, I'm saying the
Oh,
adult
parent,
population.
adult.
So how do we expect our parents to help our children with their homework?
Or read and comprehend.
Reading
Exactly.
exactly,
Correct.
and that's where we're at now, because this cell phone is so powerful that each child now has a cell phone at an early age. They
3 and
see
4.
they see it, but they don't comprehend what's going on. So now this is where my campaign and my policies I want to implement them in the first 90 days, and I want to advocate, because there is a board of 7. So I want to strongly be boots on the ground and say, this is what we need. We need early childhood engagement, where we essentially do a hooked on phonics package, and we send it to families inside the district who possibly have children already attending the school. So if we identify you have a younger brother or sister that's at the ages of 2, 3, 4, and 5. If they're not in school at 5, we understand, because not every school has early preschool 4, and they don't have preschool 3 in Detroit. If we send them these essentially hooked on phonics packages, I don't want to copyright infringement or anything, but we essentially cultivate this new curriculum, and it has to be teacher led. We have to stop giving money to all of these contractors that come in, and we just ditch the curriculum in 3 to 5 years. We're spending millions and millions of dollars when we can give that to our teachers, and we can uplift our teachers, and they can actually develop a curriculum that actually fits our kids, that does not teach to the test.
You want the
Well,
teachers
that's
to
what
develop a
actually,
curriculum
that's
for
what,
them.
Yes,
that's what Head Start
Absolutely.
exactly.
all about.
And Starfish.
Yeah,
Yes.
I mean, really,
Mhm.
exactly. And so, what's going on with those programs?
Now, if I may interject, Doctor, I took a look at Head Start and Starfish, because Navios Hobby Lounge, we do a lot of writing, and I speak for the contractors, as I am one of those contractors who get in there. A lot of the programs are working alongside the schools, but where the school stops, the sign-up sheet stops. So for me, we're trying to make it more immersible into the community. So when you come out to hear your favorite poets speak, you're going to learn how to break down words. You're going to learn how to write a haiku. You're going to learn what a simile is. You're going to learn what a metaphor is. You're going to learn how to take something that means something else and apply it to yourself, which in fact motivates you to comprehend at a higher level without having to deal with the necessary literary frustration. However, my colleagues in this area do not focus on that. A lot of people focus on the grants. A lot of people focus on the funding, and a lot of people take that money and offer your kids sugary juices and sugary snacks to basically be a daycare, but not actually make anything that helps the children read. I've asked this before. If all these contracts are making this money, then how come there's no kids bop for black kids?
Because
How come there's no educational outreach in their music? I watched one program, I cannot think of the name of it, but it's a little girl singing the alphabet on YouTube. And I play that for my 5-year-old son, but that's the only option. I think in that and Akili, that's the only option. Where is Detroit's version of that?
But that's where it comes important to vote for school board members who actually care about education, and not voting to be and not being a rubber stamp, not voting as a rubber stamp. You have to understand, when I talked about the allocation of dollars, I wasn't speaking about our smaller contractors. I'm talking about our major contractors that are getting millions for curriculum.
Absolutely. I agree with you.
That is the issue. And I want to empower our teachers. That's the first point on there. Because we have to retain our teachers, because teachers are leaving after 3 to 5 years.
Exactly.
And then also we have to get black and brown people inside our buildings to teach our babies, because often we give teachers who come from different districts, and they see the opportunity, and they come in and they give them a raise. And they also pay for their education. They'll pay for a master's, so they'll pay for them to get their teaching cert. They get that. There's no retention with that, and there's no clause in that contract that keeps them here and remands them inside the district. They end up leaving and find a better job with their own
Absolutely.
people.
Absolutely.
It has to stop. We literally have to invest in the community to find the teachers, to build the teachers. We can do it. We have all these Detroit Promise programs and all these programs where we talk about, oh, you can go to school for free. But where is the track to go and be an educator? Where is the track to be a firefighter? Where is the track to be a police officer? Where is the track to be an entrepreneur? We don't have that. And I want to also open the parent engagement piece up. I want to open the schools on the weekends. We pay so much money for taxes. But what amenities as Detroiters do we have?
Absolutely.
They're abysmal. If you go to Grosse
That's
Pointe
true.
South or Grosse Pointe North, you see the grandparents, the aunts, the uncles, and the parents walking the track on a Saturday morning because it's open and available. Now, people often say, well, they're going to tear it up. Well, pay for the security. Use the community use program that we have, that we often do, that we use for Cass and Renaissance and King. Make people feel like they're a part of the community. Stop treating us as animals in cages. That's why our education system is terrible, because we expect our children to perform at a very high level, but all we're doing is testing them and put them in cages as if they're lab mice. You cannot continue to expect greatness. We also have issues. When I'm a former athlete, I never see anyone talking about investing into our kids. We have some of the greatest athletes ever to come out of the PSL. We do not invest into them with money. We're not investing into them with time. We're not investing into them with finding NIL deals or finding ways to push them to the next level, to the collegiate level, and making sure they're sustainable once they leave outside of Detroit. Because we can push them while they're here and they're maintaining a 1.6 GPA.
Absolutely.
What good is that going to do for them when they get to the NFL? We have the highest number of NFL players in the country come from Detroit. No one talks about that. And you got to understand, if we're gonna produce, we need to invest. And it can't just be with football. It can't just be with basketball. It has to be with STEM. It has to be with poetry. It has to be with skilled trades. It has to stop being a conversation of who the have and the have-nots. Because skilled trades is not something that's impossible to implement inside our schools. We know this. The unions are strong. But why do they not why do they not teach to our children? Because the color of our skin, it has to be the issue. It's the only issue.
Now,
So those are good things that you want to
Advocate for it, yes.
Someone else has asked, should schools, and this is a hot topic, should schools be allowed to keep gender identity issues with students from their parents? Should
One more time.
schools be allowed to keep gender identity issues with students
No.
from their parents?
Listen, as a candidate, I would say it's the parent's decision. If the child, you have to talk about these things at home. Now we get into a constitutional battle. If you're talking about what your child is doing at school, we're in a constitutional battle, and that leads to nothing but days and
No.
days, hours and
I-
hours of
I'd like to-
litigation.
Understanding the question.
I think
It
it's
says, should schools be allowed to keep gender identity issues with students from their parents? Because they're saying
Yes.
Yeah.
that children can
Well.
do what they want to do, gender-wise,
Yeah.
I'd
and
like
you
to-
don't have to tell your parents. So
yeah.
wait a minute. My granddaughter, who when she was in kindergarten,
Mm-hmm.
there was a child in kindergarten. What is that? 5, 6?
Mm-hmm.
That their parents were allowing them to change their gender, and so she
I'm
came
sorry,
home
what do
with
you mean?
questions.
You
She
mean
went
allowing
from
them to change the?
dress as a
correct.
to
when
be
you
a
say
boy or
opposite
girl,
gender, okay.
take
You
the
mean-
pills and whatever as a 5
Oh,
or
wow.
6-year-old.
Yeah.
So they had to. It was being discussed in the classroom, and my granddaughter came home, and her parents, who were not prepared to have this kind of conversation with their 5 or 6, whatever, a 5-year-old, they weren't prepared. They said,
Is
"Oh
it
my God,
Michigan?
wait."
No,
Okay.
But that issue is an issue across
No,
the
I'm
nation.
asking where did that happen
That
I
was-
mean, I'm not
that was in
asking what.
Texas.
Okay.
now if I may, I have a 5-year-old, and I'm going to interject maybe where my fellow candidate
I can't-
may not be
yeah.
able to, and I'm going to say this: if you can give my child a progress report for not being able to read, you can send a note home when he's questioning his gender. It's in my wheelhouse to take care of. He is my child at the end of the day. While I'm sending him to your institute to learn, you report back to me about everything else. If my child throws a chair, you'll call me about his behavior. If my child decides to put on a dress, you need to call me as well.
Exactly.
Not that I'm going to be negative or positive, but as the parent, you cannot take the ball out of my hand. It is not your play to run, and I don't like the way that the schools have began to quarterback the parenting portion of life. Because if my child's only reprimand is in school and all of that becomes secrecy, then I am the daycare and you are in fact parenting the child.
But now that goes
I think
back
we
to
have to go back to
the student
well,
code of conduct. That goes back
I
to
was
that
ready to
student code
say
of
not
conduct.
only
Absolutely.
that laws. So let me just take you back
3 more minutes.
for a second when
I want you to share whatever else you want.
when young girls when it came out that they didn't have to report to their parents whether or not they had an abortion. That was actually mandated. It was a law that they didn't have to do it. From what I understand, in Michigan, I can't talk about Texas or any other place, but in Michigan, that the kids can change their female to male or binary or non-binary, whatever it is that they want to change it to. But from what I understand, there are very few sex changes that are happening. Now, I could be wrong, so you guys are. I mean, I'm in schools too, but I haven't seen any sex changes. Let me just
Well,
say that.
I,
So you can go
Well,
ahead.
I have
I've
I've
seen
I
it.
have
some
seen it.
and heard about some.
So I have seen it firsthand. It's a very. I think the thing has to be now because the laws are, like you said, it's about laws. It's about
It's about
policy.
laws. Exactly.
So now that the law is enacted, it's about the training. It's about that social emotional learning piece inside the schools. So, as you said, you want the education part to also be at home, right?
Absolutely.
It's hard to do that with the laws in place. Now, if we can train our educators and our support staff and our building staff of how to appropriately handle things so that they do not end up, because most of the times you look to the left. We had a young man who transitioned to be a woman. He was able, and this was in high school when I was working in high school, he was able to enter the girls' bathroom. My first time seeing it, I was enamored. I didn't believe it because I had never seen it before. And as many of the staff had never seen it before. But now we have to talk about what that looks like. Do we have to call parents and do we have to call families and do we have to have a school thing? But also, what does that do to each family that is involved? Because now you have some parents that might spew rhetoric of hate. And now you have some parents
Which
that
is not good
which is
either.
not good as well. So like I said, that piece as the political side, it becomes a war. And now we see where our country is split in half. As you see this election, it's terrible because we are split in half. And it has nothing to do about facts. It has to do about just emotions. And I tell you that politics is nothing but an emotional state. Voting has
Can
become an
be.
emotional state instead of
Yeah.
a state of logic and understanding. We have someone currently right now is running for president who has been convicted of raping someone, and we constantly ask, "Who are you voting for?" We have someone who has filed for bankruptcy 9 times, but say, I am equipped to run a country."
Absolutely.
This is not an election of logic. And as I feel about my election for school board, this is an election about our kids. This is an election about our parents. This is an election about our teachers. Who's talking about policy?
Well,
I
we
mean-
have a lot of viewers also too
Yeah.
that feel very strongly that Trump is the candidate for. Oh well, that the other person is the candidate of choice.
Well, I just
And that will,
got them
and it
heated.
has
Right.
helped,
I do
that
have
has helped people of color tremendously.
Well, Central Park 5.
I do have a question for our candidate before I know because
Oh,
we're gonna
yeah.
have to turn it over for you.
Yeah.
I just have a question for you. You mentioned something earlier that stands out and it's very profound, but I believe we passed it a little bit quicker than what we should have. My question is this: a lot of our community is police, the firefighters, the EMS, the educators. All of those people are outsourced from our community. Now, while that is a large problem, I have been to bat trying to solve that problem. And when I went to bat to solve that problem, the number one thing that I learned was the issue was that we outsource our best and brightest. So our youth does not grow up thinking, hey, I'm going to be a great teacher at the school I went to. They think, hey, I'm going to get out of here, and then I'm going to be a great teacher outside of the community that I was actually in because the community did not foster a growth-like environment for them. Now, as a candidate who's going to be entering that, you represent something I didn't get to see as a youth, which is somebody who feels like me, shares my opinions, thinks like me, and actually is upstanding. At that time, rap culture had made gangsters and thugs the most popular thing, and that still lingers over our culture. So once you assume your position, how do you intend to retain some of our greatness to help improve our community and enrich ourselves?
That's a wonderful question. And I am a history buff, and I want to address that. I know we got to transition soon, so I'll quickly address those. It might not be quickly, but understanding the history of Detroit is very, very important when you ask that question.
Absolutely.
As you guys are a little bit more seasoned than us, and with all respect, understanding you guys got to experience a time where there was a requirement for you to work inside the city, you had to live inside the city. After that policy was lifted, I believe, under the Archer administration, you saw an influx of people, of black and white, leaving the city at a fast rate. Okay, right before the housing crisis happened in 06 through 08. They left. You obliterated a tax base, essentially. I grew up on the street. I grew up on Burden Street, right behind St. John. 10 of my neighbors were white, and the other neighbors that were black were firemen, police officers, school teachers. As soon as they lifted, the neighborhood went down. We're talking about a very affluential neighborhood. My next door neighbor was a doctor. And the one after that was a firefighter
And
and
we
a
also have
nurse.
to ask, why did they leave?
Why did they leave? Because things started changing in
Things
the
are
city.
changing.
You know, and we go back to race. We continue to go back to race.
But Mr.
Yeah.
Mr. Snap,
Yes.
what things before we do transition?
Yes.
I want you to tell people
Real
how
quick.
they can reach you.
Mhm.
I know at ksnap.com.
Yes.
But anything, give us some lessons. I know you're on the campaign trail. You've got some other places
Yeah.
to go, and we so appreciate you coming here today to be on Community Updates and Enlightened Hearts right here on WJZZ Cool TV, the coolest station in the world.
Yeah.
What is something else that you would like to leave with the viewers and listeners?
Again, thank you for having me. This was a great conversation. I wanted to
Great
continue
conversation.
because
Yes,
this is
I know, it was good.
this is how you build. This is what I call church. This is my idea of church when we build, when two or more are gathered. Before I leave, I just want people to understand that policy is at the forefront of this entire election, whether it's national, whether it's local, but in particular with the school board race. No one's talking about policy. No one wants to step up and talk about policy. Policy is what changes our schools. Understanding how you vote changes our schools. Understanding a person reads the contract and they know where the dollars are being allocated towards. Understanding that if a person doesn't know how to go inside of a school and doesn't know the first thing about running a school, that's the issue. Why are you running? It has to be about our kids. It has to be about our teachers. It has to be about our community. Now, all I want to say before I leave is I want to bring back the community aspect of Detroit Public Schools Community District to where people were proud to go to school, where you have your Persian Doughboys proud to go back to football games and be part of the community, when you have your Osborne Knights ready to go up to the school and be a part of a community there. I think that everyone has to have that aspect back inside because that is the only difference between our schools and our suburban counterparts is that the exposure and the community are involved. And that's what I want to change inside in the district. But also with the other points I have on here, I want to make sure we understand we have to be back together as a family and as a community.
You got my vote.
Sorry.
Thank you so much for coming and
Thank
sharing.
you. Thank you.
And much success to you. As get out and vote, everyone. If you
Yes.
haven't voted, I've got my sticker. I went out and voted today. Get out and vote. Do not
Yes.
think that your vote does not matter. It matters.
Yes.
You've got Ken Snap right here. You were able to hear his views. We've had people on for the past few weeks.
Yes.
Someone that is running. Go back and listen to the YouTubes. It's every show that we do. You can find a replay on YouTube. Go back and listen. Hear what your candidates are, where they stand on different things. Thank you, Mr. Snap,
Thank
for
you.
coming.
Yeah,
Much
thank
success
you.
to you.
Thank you.
And, go vote.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank
Okay,
you.
I'm just going to get out of here. It was nice meeting everyone.
Nice
Thank
meeting
you
you as well.
Thank you, ladies.
Take
I got
care.
my picture with you before you left. I'm
Yes,
glad.
yes, yes.
Take care. Nice meeting you.
All right, just walk up.
Yeah, you're good.
Bye.
So next we've got DeAndre Jackson. Well, he's not next. He's been here the whole time with his dynamic conversations. But Mr. DeAndre Jackson is a dynamic entrepreneur and community advocate, and he passionately, and you can hear his passion even as he was sharing just for the past half hour, he shares driving initiatives that empower and support businesses. He is the owner of Navi O's Hobby Lounge, LLC, and he's cultivated a vibrant space for hobby enthusiasts to connect and share their passions. Tell us more about that and why you chose to start Navi OS Lounge, Hobby Lounge.
So Navios was a project that was near and dear to my heart. The black community and community in general started around spoken words, poetry, community, comedy, just getting out and laughing and having a great time. We used to come together as a people and enjoy ourselves and feel very safe amongst each other. And I didn't see anywhere where people could do that anymore. And Navios is actually my son's name.
Oh.
And I didn't know where to take him so he could see what we were actually like. So I made a place. And it made a home for multiple other people and multiple other people's children to come and feel safe and learn and be educated in a calm and relaxing environment.
Awesome. So you mentioned how we need each other in our communities, and how you contribute to the overall mission is providing the space for people to come and do these things. And I know that you have some upcoming events as well. Dr. Regina, did you have a question you wanted?
Well, it's called again Navio.
Navio's Hobby Lounge.
Okay, and where is it located?
It was located in Livonia, Michigan, but we recently closed down that location so that we can go university to university and bring it to communities because a lot of our guests stated that it was hard to get to the location. So we changed that, and now we're mobile. We've talked to Wayne State, we've talked to Wayne County Community College, we've talked to Madonna University, Schoolcraft College, and we're working right now to try to get ourselves inserted in those places so that if you are in the community, you don't have to go that far to get to us.
That's awesome. And tell me more about your mission.
So Navio's, so I'm on a plethora of fronts, but Navio specifically is to bring back poetry, comedy, and art.
Okay.
If you bring those three things back, usually education follows.
Especially with the way you were sharing as you pontificated about the poetry and how it will teach people the various aspects of, say it again.
The similes, the metaphors, the haikus, how to use their words, just to do more than rap. A lot of kids are beautiful poets, but they think they have to be rappers, so they talk about negative things. And then you give them the stage and you tell them to, just write how you feel. And then you get a beautiful soliloquy about how the rent needs to be paid and their girlfriend just left them, but they're trying their best to build an engine in their garage. And there's no space for that in rap that's supposed to be so hardcore, at least currently. So when you give them that stage, you get to actually meet the person. You get to hear a part of their soul expressed on stage. Not to mention, a lot of our kids suffer from stage fright. You can't be a politician or a candidate like Ken Snap and not be able to speak in front of people. So it's kind of a 2-for-1.
Okay. Well, so I often hear so I'm a counselor. And I do a lot from the aspect of the all or nothing. There are many people believe that rap truly speaks to the heart of what's going on in the community. Can you tell me, because I've heard you say a couple of times about rap, what rap really is hardcore, is not really teaching our children.
Absolutely.
So can you elaborate on that a little more?
Absolutely. Rap used to speak to the heart of community when you had Queen Latifah's, when you had, just
Tupac?
different. Well,
What about Tupac?
I don't mind Tupac much, but that's probably the start of where it became an industry. And like any great thing, if you look at basketball, when basketball first started, people just played it. There wasn't packed out stages, but there were great basketball players. And then it became an industry. Then it became a multi-million and multi-billion-dollar industry. And the more it grows and the more it becomes an industry, the more rules, the more they control the actual sport. So it's far removed from what it actually started as. And hip-hop's a lot like that.
Okay.
It was started off just to let people have an outlet for what they were experiencing, but now they're capitalizing on trauma, and every song is about how your daughter should be a stripper and your son should be a shooter and everybody should do drugs. And that's not at the heart of our community. I mean, now when you look at like Run DMC and what they were rapping about, yeah, some of the lyrics were more hardcore, but they were just expressing what they were experiencing. I think the black community has evolved a little bit past what rap has allowed.
Okay, all right. Well, that's good to hear because I know you're right. Our children are listening to it. Particularly we have our Gen Zs and millennials. That's what they grew up on. Now, during my age time, they were actually just starting to come out a lot, and so. I do know people really connect with rap. Let me just say it like that. And you're right. There are songs that I think kids are not listening.
With some rap.
Yeah. Okay. I think people don't realize how it degrades women.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it is. It's very degrading towards women. As a matter of fact, I love the fact that you say.
Poetry. They'll call themselves what the rapper calls
they
them,
do.
and it's like seriously.
But I think educating
absolutely.
oneself, right? So you have poetry, you have comedy, and you have art. And I think that's really, those are some great tools to utilize, because our kids need to be able to understand that there are other platforms where they can express themselves, right?
Absolutely.
So I was talking to a counselor in the school, and this school does care. So